Oh, yeah, I better. First of all, Byron, would you please silence your phone?
Ain't nobody calling you.
They just did. Wish me good.
I guess after Byron and everybody else has silenced their phones, we can begin. Good evening, and thank you all so much for coming. We did get a pretty good day outside today. It wasn't too bad. I want to first start off by saying my name is Karan Johnson. I am elected Vice President of the Paraprofessionals of Local 420, which is the support staff for St. Louis Public Schools. Please feel free to call me CJ. Local 420 has served SLPS for nearly 90 years. We have the distinction of being one of the first unions to be racially integrated into the United States. As a matter of fact, Local 420 was racially integrated long before St. Louis Public Schools. We currently have nearly 2,000 members. Let's be clear, throughout the presentation, you'll keep hearing me say elected officials. We want to make sure that we know we are representing democracy. Shout out to democracy. Public schools are the cornerstone of democracy. Do we have any elected school board members in the building tonight? Please wave your hands. Thank you all for being here. Elected school board members, let's be clear. Do we have any other elected officials in the building tonight? If so, wave your hand. Mr. President Ozier, wave your hand.
Any union officials?
Thank you all so much again. Remember, elected officials, not appointed. So we'll shout out to democracy. Mr. Ray Cummings, who was twice elected president of AFT Local 420, he's going to come and speak on the real truth. He's going to give words of wisdom from W.E.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, and Dr. Martin Luther King about profiteers using civil rights as a ruse to take over public institutions. Please give a hand for Mr. President Cummings.
Thank you, Ms. CJ. First, I'd like to say thank God for allowing me to be here and address you this evening. And let's hear it again for democracy. I've been elected to this position twice. The first time I was elected, it was a three-person race. I got 60% of the vote. If there are any politicians here, they know what kind of vote that is. With three people, you get 60%. Second time I was elected, I was unopposed. So one thing that let me know, either nobody wants this job or I'm doing a pretty good job. And since I got a big ego, it's because I'm doing a pretty good job. I want to also say, we don't have any problem with democracy in this country, except in places where there are a lot of black and poor kids. Then we got to have appointed boards. You figure that one out. I want to talk about the real truth. The departure from the direct democratic control of schools is now being influenced and supported by the elites who seek to privately manage and privatize education. During the last decade, the Charter Cartel advocates supported foundations like the Opportunity Trust, think tanks, and various policymakers have framed an equity discourse around charter principles, touting the benefits of private management of public schools within a market-based system. Now using the cry of civil rights, moneyed interests have created local AstroTurf organizations like We Power, Bridge to Hope, and STL Kids. For those of you that don't know, AstroTurf groups are fake grassroots organizations. These astroturf groups utilize resources from billionaires and other supporters of the Charter Cartel philosophy to go on rants at democratically elected school board meetings designed to erode confidence in traditional public schools, yet they never mention problems associated with charter schools. This is right out of the privatizer's playbook. I have three individuals in my life that I consider to be my North Stars who guide me when I am confronted with matters with respect to civil rights. Let me share with you what their feelings were when it comes to the privatization of public institutions which are designed for the public good, like the public school. NAACP co-founder W.E.B. Du Bois, in his essay, Negroes and the Crisis of Capitalism in the U.S., praised highly the virtues of collaborative social and governmental action. He spoke out strongly against the role of business and capitalist control that usurp government institutions designed for the public good and make the throttling of democracy and distortion of education and failure of justice widespread. Malcolm X characterized market-based public policy as vulturistic blood-sucking. He too advocated for collaborative social systems and governmental action to solve problems related to the public good. Dr. Martin Luther King argued that we often have socialism in public policy for the rich philanthropists and rugged market capitalism for the poor. Du Bois, Malcolm X, and Dr. King clearly would have pushed back against the political framing of the Charter Cartel by promoting civil rights. They recognized the opportunistic patterns seen in the purposeful and unrelenting location of groups privatizing of public schools, ignore the history of black civil rights leaders advocating for collaborative, community-based systems of social support, and their distrust of those who promote privatization of democratic institutions designed for the public good, like public schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Cummings. He always got some words of wisdom when we always take him his words of wisdom. We want to thank him for who he is and everything that he does for us. Next, we're going to have introducing our very own Cameron Owens. She's a local 420's building steward for Career Academy High School, and she's going to speak on Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it relates to students' achievements. Give it up for Cameron, please.
Good evening. I'm going to speak about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and student achievement. Abraham Harold Maslow was an American psychologist who created Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a theory of psychological health predicated on fulfilling innate human needs and priority, culminating in personality development that allows an individual to thrive in our society. As a follower of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are several conditions in most cases that need to be met in order for students to perform at an acceptable level academically. Specifically, at schools where students underperform academically in large numbers, students must have the following needs met as their best chance for academic success. First is physiological needs. This is why we have breakfast and lunch programs. Generally, we do not care if people are hungry, but we accept the fact that students cannot learn if their stomachs are turning flips. Second is safety and security needs. Generally, we have not accepted that many students need this to achieve. For example, SLPS has thousands of students classified as homeless, and yet we keep track of the numbers, but we do not ensure that students have a home to go to and from each day. Third is the sense of community is a need. Students have a need of belonging with stability. We accept this by setting high expectations for students, but only with words and not by deeds. We do this in superficial ways, like just calling them scholars. Number 4 is the sense of self-esteem need. One symptom of this need not being met is a lack of motivation to learn and to excel. However, once most students reach this level, academic achievement begins. Branding alone cannot just satisfy this need. In closing, remember the teaching of Maslow when implementing interventions for schools that have large numbers of students who underachieve before considering the education privatizers. Silver bullet and promises that their education snake oil will cure our problems with underperforming students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. I appreciate you over there. Thank you. Camrys, she's absolutely correct. I was having a problem on my way here because I was hungry. I couldn't concentrate. So if we as adults know that we can't concentrate when we're hungry, how do we not know that our kids can't concentrate if they're hungry? So I'm going to keep it moving. Mr. Stephen Hill, this man was elected 3 times as the first vice president of Local 420. He used to be my teacher in middle school, and I gave him hell. But I am grateful to now be working with him. I learned so much from him, and he's going to come up and speak to you all about there is no such thing as failing schools. Give it up for Mr. Hill.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Good. All right. There's no such thing as failing schools. Okay, we'll talk about that just a little bit. There's no such thing as failing schools. However, we do have certain schools where students do underperform academically in large numbers. When we examine the social conditions of many of these students in those schools, where we find that there are many commonalities in what they have to deal with. Most of the students come from neighborhoods where there's a lot of violence and drug-related trauma, high poverty due to unemployment or underemployment, and generally a lack of hope for the future. Public education privatizers like the Opportunity Trust would like to have us believe that violence and drug-related trauma coupled with poverty means absolutely nothing when it comes to kids. Kids to perform at acceptable levels, let me put that in there for sure. They believe all it takes is an appointed board and charter school management team to come in and improve these students' academic performances. Doesn't work. I urge you as supporters of public education to reject the educational privatizers' belief, but rather to adopt the full-service community school model with wraparound services for those schools where students underperform in large numbers. Yeah, they deserve that. And if you check, you'll find that there's tons of information out there that can support everything that I've said to you this evening. So I thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. He was pretty good with y'all in class. He used to talk like the Clear Eyes commercial. But let me keep it going. I want to introduce to you all Dr. Nelva Brooks. She is our elected Vice President of Leadership and Development for AFT Local 420. And she is the reason that I am with St. Louis Public Schools. She is the reason that I am with the union. And she is the reason why I am fighting harder than I've ever fought before for public education. I appreciate her, and I appreciate everything I'm learning from her. Dr. Brooks is going to come up to you all, and she's going to speak about Lift Them Up. Give a hand for Dr. Brooks, please.
want to say good evening. And I want to thank President Cummings for this opportunity. You are truly an educational leader way before your time.
Thank you very much.
Lift them up. Many of our teachers who work at schools where students underperform in large numbers believe that they are lacking, and they look to Washington University leadership training, SLU Prime, Opportunity Trust, fellowships, or some other folks who have no real track records of accomplishments as the ones that they need to show them the pathway to more successful student performance. Sometimes those teachers even believe it's their fault alone that those students are underperforming. Realistically speaking, can teachers alone fulfill needs like ensuring that students are feeling safety and security in their lives? The answer is no, they cannot. Can management or whomever occupies that role do it alone? No. Be reminded, according to that, students cannot move past level until the previous level is fulfilled. Therefore, I urge you, as citizens concerned about the education of children in the city of St. Louis, to reach out to those educators in those schools and lift them up. Lift them up by giving them the type of support they really need. Excuse me. Advocating for implementing a full-service community school model with wraparound services, excuse me, in those schools. Lift them up. Lift them up like this and watch student academic achievement soar. Thank you for your time.
If you didn't hear what she said, she definitely made sure she showed you. She is one of our ESOL educators, and baby, she is cold. I want to just give you all a brief bio, and we're gonna watch a little video. But before we watch the video, I wanted to tell you all that on the screen you saw, all students cannot learn. For a long time, we heard students, all students can learn, all students can learn. All students cannot learn unless they have the support systems in place to remove barriers, to their learning. So this person, Mr. Jitu Brown, he is the National Director of the Journey for Justice Alliance, JFJ, J for J. He was one of 12 parents. He was one of 12 parents, grandparents, and community members who put their bodies on the line in a 34-day-long hunger strike to save the historically famous Walter H. Dyett High School in Chicago from closure. And they won. Shout out to them. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you, Mr. Jitu Brown, and all of your people. Now we'll have the video.
Good evening, sisters and brothers. This is Jitu Brown, National Director of the Journey for Justice Alliance, coming to you live and direct from Chicago, the first school district to move away from school choice and to center sustainable community schools as the future of its public schools. You have the power to demand equitable public schools for your children. If they don't have equity, you can't have choice, because they've robbed the choice of a good neighborhood school within safe walking distance of your homes. So don't drink the Kool-Aid, don't be misled. Stand up, St. Louis. You are not alone. We are with you. We are calling for equity, not the illusion of school choice. You all have a good evening. Stand strong, and we with you.
Thank you again, Big Brother Jitu Brown. Now I am going to turn it over to our first panel. This young man, we work together. A lot of times I call him one of the old people in the room. But this young man, Byron Clements, he is the Local 420's elected retiree chapter chair. And Byron Clements has been elected a few times to this here board. So he's going to facilitate our TIF and tax abatements research study presentation. As you listen to the presentation, you have in your folders a white index card. I don't see. Like that. Seth, can you come up a little bit? Ben, can you come up a little bit? You have a white index card. Ben and Seth, as you listen to this, you may have questions. Ben and Seth will collect your cards. Just put your card up in the air while they're talking, while you have your questions, the white one. And then they'll come and collect it, and you all have time to, we'll answer your questions after the presentation. Is that okay? Okay, looks like we understand.
And you can start writing them now if you've been looking at the study. If you have any questions, you can start writing them now. Well, first of all, let's thank Harris Stowe for this beautiful auditorium. Yeah. How many of you are taxpayers? Just applaud if you pay taxes. We thank you for doing that. How many of you pay your fair share of taxes? You know, I got to say, my brother Ray and I started looking this over Peabody in St. Louis. You may remember we gave them huge tax breaks, mostly property taxes. The CEO of Peabody at that time got a break on his earnings tax. He pays 0.5% earnings tax. What do you pay, Greg? 1%. Wow, is that fair? No, it's not fair. There are some not-for-profits now that got into development, that kind of thing. Do they pay their fair share of taxes? Somewhat questionable whether they do or not. So you think about Maslow, and you think about what good investments. Now, I have to say I'm a union member, and I'm part of the Labor Council, the Labor Club. I work with construction trade folks all the time. You know what? They're on the same page with us about this. Why would that be? They're not saying, give them everything. They're not saying that at all. It must be fair. That's what we're about. There's been some attacks on this study. I'm here to tell you that Good Jobs First is a legitimate organization. You should know that. Look them up. Look at I'm not going to go on about it, but you should look them up. Do the research on it. National, a great reputation for what they do. So first of all, I want to introduce Greg Leroy, the executive director, and we have the main author of this, Anya Gieses. Welcome them both, please. Some of you are familiar. It's already broken the news media a little early in some cases, but it's out there now. Please look at the study while you get a chance. I think it's not totally surprising to some of us, some of the results that we see, but see the hard data and the numbers to support it is just amazing. Greg?
Thanks very much, Byron. Am I turned on here? Hello, hello? Yep. Just one mic, sorry, thanks a lot. Thanks very much, Byron, and I want to congratulate President Cummings and all the other officers of Local 420 for sponsoring this event. Actually, we've been working with the local for almost 2 years now. This is the second forum, October 22. We were going to have an event, and that was the day one of your members got shot, and everybody went into lockdown, and we moved to Zoom that night, unfortunately. But the issues that we raised then, we just know even better today, and that's what the point of the study is. So just to explain who I am, my name is Greg Leroy. I'm the founder and executive director of Good Jobs First. We're more than 25 years old. I've been working on these issues for most of my working life, which is to say since the Carter administration. I've been working on these issues. We are known, Good Jobs First, as a watchdog group that focuses on transparency and accountability. That is sunshine. If you can't see where the money's going and who's getting the money and what's happening with the money, you don't know what's going on. You don't know if it's inequitable. You don't know if it's unfair or fair. You don't know if it's effective. right? So the first point, and the reason we were able to do this study, frankly, is because we won some new sunshine a few years ago that opened a whole new lens into the issue of equity or lack thereof in public education. And that's how we were able to do the study. We're going to talk a lot about TIF today, because tax increment financing is the villain, the main villain of our study. How many people have a sense of what TIF districts are? A few people do? Well, many people, wow, okay. For the rest of you, I'm gonna quickly explain, okay? So TIF stands for Tax Increment Financing. Financing means borrowing money. The point of TIF is you designate a small area that needs help. Supposedly it's blighted, and it needs help because it's too risky to invest in, and you need to assist the redevelopment. You have to give the developer a subsidy to make it worth their while to come do the project in the little TIF district. When that TIF district gets designated and the redevelopment starts to happen, property values go up, right? Because you're building new buildings, you're improving things, you're putting a lot of new public infrastructure, also making the land a lot more valuable. When those property values go up, property taxes go up, right? The assessed value, the assessment of the property goes up, and all that increase is called the increment. It's the incremental increased amount of property taxes resulting from that redevelopment. When that happens, the increment does not go to SLPS. It does not go to the city. It does not go for public safety or sanitation or trash removal. It goes for just the redevelopment in the TIF district for 23 years. And that's a huge amount of diversion of property tax for a very long period of time. That's what a TIF district is, and that's why they're so expensive and why you have to be careful with them. And you have to be very intentional about only doing it when it really is necessary. In your case in Missouri, for more than 20 years, your TIF program has been perverted. I can't say it any other way. And this is not unique to Missouri, but it's severe in Missouri.
Excuse me, Greg.
Sure.
They can't hear you.
I'm
on
sorry,
live
did I
stream.
swallow the mic? Is that better now?
Yeah.
I apologize. Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
all
Ray.
right.
Okay. So for 20 years, your program, your TIF program in Missouri has been perverted. I can't say it any other way. There was a court case involving the suburban De Pere, Missouri, your wealthy suburb here, involving the mall, the Westfield Mall there. And the town was convinced by the mall to say, you know, that mall is blighted. It doesn't have a Nordstrom yet. We need a $31 million TIF to bring Nordstrom into the mall, and then it won't be blighted anymore. And the town said, okay, and then there was somebody sued saying that's crazy, Nordstrom, blight, you know, give me a break. But your highest court in the state of Missouri allowed that to happen, basically saying the word blight means anything any city wants it to mean. And once that floodgate opened after that case, it's been all downhill, right? Missouri and St. Louis specifically are extreme outliers in the use of TIF because blight doesn't mean anything anymore. You can put TIFs all over the place under that loosey-goosey definition. So that's the core problem here. At the end of the day, the state has to fix that problem, but there's other things that can be done that we recommend in the study in the meantime. Okay? Everybody with me about the problem with TIF? All right. So transparency. We've been pushing transparency at many different levels for a long time. And Missouri, to its credit, is a better than average state, saying on its state website where state money goes for economic development. And we have a big database on our website called Subsidy Tracker that captures that data, and I encourage you to look at it. But at the local level, things have been much worse historically. Cities and counties and school districts, local government bodies, have been much less transparent historically than the states. And we've been trying. We at Good Jobs First started naming and shaming and issuing report card studies 18 years ago. We've been working on this for a very long time. And we won a big breakthrough 8 years ago with this very obscure body called the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. Now, some people working in the area of public pensions might remember that GASB set forth rules for something called OPEB, or other post-employment benefits. It's the body that said all those years out and how much in health care benefits they owe their retirees, right? It's the same body. It's the body that sets forth what are called Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, or GAAP, G-A-A-P, for the public sector. And there's good reason for GAAP. Frankly, it helps school districts, cities, counties get the best possible credit ratings when they borrow money on Wall Street. They float a school bond or a sewer bond. If you conform to GAAP, it's easier to get a better credit rating and lower your interest rate and save money when you borrow money. So we like GASB, right? This is not onerous. This is a good thing. Well, and 8 years ago, GASB made another amendment to GAAP saying it's called Statement 77 on tax abatement disclosures. And I'm proud to tell you that we, together with your national AFT and many other bodies, labor bodies around the country, piled on to a comment period in 2014, 2015, and convinced GASB to issue this statement. Hundreds of us said, yeah, it's about time. We want to know how much revenue our local governments are losing to corporate welfare. It's one thing to make you report about pension obligations, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There's got to be fairness on the revenue side and the corporate tax break side too. So Statement 77, which took effect 6 years ago, fiscal 17, has for now 6 years in a row required that most school districts, most cities, most counties, in their annual financial report, their backward-looking spending report, their audited official document that gets used, by everybody looking at their books, including Wall Street, they have to put a note in that document saying naming the programs, naming TIF, urban redevelopment, land clearance, whatever the programs are, and saying how much revenue they lost in that 1 year to that program. And so Anya, crazy enough as she is, does this full time looking at these PDFs for thousands of bodies around the country, including all 6 years for all 24 school districts that we studied in this subject, and put them in a spreadsheet and said, okay, what do they tell? And I won't steal her thunder. I'll let her tell the story. But that's how we got this. And I'm proud to tell you, you're not alone, right? Thanks to this new data, teachers in Cincinnati, people in Kansas City, teachers in South Carolina, lots of people in New York State, more people in Illinois than ever are aware of and pushing back on this problem, right? You are very much part of a young national movement enabled by this new data saying, wait a minute, we didn't know it was that bad, and we didn't know it was that racist and that unequal, and that's not right. And we hope you'll agree with us when you hear the numbers that something's got to be done. And we know how to do it, right? We know that you can fix TIF, you can protect school funding, you can do other things from some other states that we've seen now to make this better. And with that, I'm looking at my notes here. I'll say a couple other things after Anya summarizes the study. Thank you. Everybody's clear about TIF and GASB, right? That was my job, to set Anya up. Okay, good.
Thank you, Greg. And please welcome Anya.
Yeah.
Hi there, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Good. My name is Anya. I am the lead author on this study, and I'm originally from Philadelphia. I'm a research analyst at Good Jobs First, mainly working on our database tax break tracker and focusing on issues around education funding.
I apologize, Anya. May I say that you're a graduate of the Philadelphia Public Schools?
Oh, yeah, you can. And I'll mention that a little bit later, too. So let's dive right into the findings from overarching disparities. The scope of our study focused on St. Louis public schools and the surrounding 23 suburban school districts in St. Louis County, looking at data from the years 2017 through 2022. Through those 6 years, these 24 school districts lost revenue of more than $260 million to tax abatements. The biggest loser in all of this was St. Louis Public Schools, and in this 6 years, the school district lost more than $167 million, or 65% of the amount abated across all of the districts we looked at. For context, the school district with the next highest amount of abatements only clocked in at $22 million. SLPS not only lost the most money in general, but it had the biggest losses on a per-student basis, losing over $1,600 per student per year. The district with the second largest abatement per student was the Specialist District of St. Louis County, at over $1,100 per student per year. And for context, that's the district that serves the students with special needs throughout St. Louis County, while St. Louis Public Schools teach their special needs students in-house. What's interesting about this also is that SLPS is a school district that's almost 90% students of color and where 100% of students qualify for free or reduced priced meals, while many of the suburban districts that lose significantly less have more white students and students from high-income families. All in all, the distribution of these school revenue losses is very uneven, and these tax abatements disproportionately harm Black and brown students, students from low-income families, and students with special needs. The systematic disparities are even more pronounced when looking at the two largest school districts by student population in the study. Like I said earlier, SLPS loses $1,600 per student per year, but that's only the second largest school district we looked at. The largest school district was Rockwood, a school district that is 75% white, and only 9% of students qualify for free or reduced price meals. In total, this school district only lost $2 million to tax abatements over the 6 years, and it came out to only $18 per student per year. SLPS students lose 91 times what Rockwood students lose. And these are school districts that are around the same size, both located in the St. Louis metropolitan area, but the school district with more Black students and more students from low-income families lost 91 times what the other school district lost. Across all the districts, that pattern rings true. Across all of them, the average white student only loses $179 per year to tax abatements, while the average student of color loses $516, and in particular, Black students lose $610 per year to tax abatements. That's more than 3 times the amount that white students lose. Family income disparities are even larger. By using the measure of free or reduced price meal qualification as an indication of income, the average low-income student loses $665 per year to tax abatements, while higher-income students only lose $133 per year. That means that low-income students are losing 5 times the amount as their higher-income counterparts. All in all, 13 suburban school districts, which is more than half of them, report losses of less than $80 per student or even none at all. This really helps to illustrate the racialized, problematic elements of how these abatement programs are used. And these are problems, though, that can be remedied by protecting school funding from costly tax abatements. And I'll go over our exact policy recommendations at the end. But first, let's dive into SLPS's specific numbers and the programs it's losing the most to. In 6 years, SLPS losses increased from $10.5 million in 2017 to $31 million in 2020. The district's largest losses came in the year 2021, with $35.9 million being abated. This means in the 6-year period that we looked at, losses more than tripled, and they seem to just keep going up, which is a very concerning trend. Let's look into the specific economic development programs that are affecting the district. By far, the most expensive program was what Greg mentioned, TIF, costing $64 million. The second most expensive program was Urban Redevelopment Corporations, which cost SLPS over $41 million, and it was another program started to encourage getting rid of blight, so it abates property taxes for specific properties that it deems blighted. And the third most expensive program is the Land Clearance for Redevelopment, clocking in at over $36 million, and it was also established to eliminate blight. These patterns continue as we zoom out and look at the results from the county as a whole. In the 24 districts, this pattern rings true, where the biggest losses come from TIF, Urban Redevelopment Corporations, and Land Clearance for Redevelopment in that order. Other costly programs include industrial development bonds, enhanced enterprise zones, and surcharge abatements. This leads me to our policy recommendations. Our first recommendation is to shield school funding from abatements for every district. That means that school shares of property tax would be 100% controlled by them, not by any state or local agency, board, municipal, or county government. School boards should be given full sole control over their tax bases. Our second recommendation is specific to St. Louis Public Schools, and we believe that they should get a TIF commission reform. We recommend that St. Louis Public Schools be given veto power or voting power in proportion to their share of the TIF revenue lost. So if the TIF commission is proposing a new TIF that would 60% of the losses would be cost to the school district should get 60% of the votes because that's their money.
Yes.
Yeah. Seeing how TIF is the costliest abatement program, it is only equitable to give the district a say in how and when TIFs are created. Our third recommendation is also specific to St. Louis Public Schools, and that is to create a TIF to aid homeless students. Building on precedents set by places like Genesee, Michigan, St. Louis could create a TIF district composed of tax-delinquent, publicly owned homes near public schools. By borrowing to fund the rehabilitation of the homes for families of homeless students, such an effort could get property back on the tax rolls while helping to stabilize school-adjacent neighborhoods. I am very hopeful that these legislations could be passed and enacted, or programs like this. For some background on me, like Byron said, I am a student of the School District of Philadelphia, and the year that I graduated high school was the same year that Good Jobs First found data that the School District of Philadelphia was losing out more than any other district in the nation. So the year that I graduated high school, the School District of Philadelphia abated $112 million. And this was the same year that I was using 20-year-old textbooks, had ceilings collapse, had gyms flood, and we never had the resources we needed. But all the while, there was $112 million that could have been used. But what makes me really hopeful is that legislators in Philadelphia saw this problem and saw this data and decided to act on it. And so now, this year, there's legislation going into effect to curb some of these tax abatements and to give money back to the schools and the students that deserve it. This money, there in Philadelphia, here in St. Louis, and across the nation, could change students' lives, and they deserve that. Reforming these abatement programs and economic development structures could mitigate the racist nature of these abatements and give kids the resources that they deserve. And if anyone doesn't have the report in front of them, you can also access it at goodjobsfirst.org, and I'll hand it back to Greg.
Okay, Anya. So I just want to point out a couple structural things that came out in that too that are crazy land here, right? So in Missouri, like in too many other states, we have sort of this intergovernmental free lunch thing with TIF, right? Where the state laws creating TIF say that the cities, or sometimes the counties, have the power to create the TIF districts. The school board has no say in the creation of the TIF districts typically, or maybe an advisory role, or a very marginal noticing role. Even though the biggest loser in that transaction, 60% of the revenue, 50%, that's very typical in many states, is lost to education, right? Public education is the most expensive local public service. It serves the most people. It's the most labor intensive. And therefore, it needs that revenue. It's the most dependent on the money lost to these abatements. So think about it for a second. What would it look like if the school board took a vote and said, we don't think the police and fire or sanitation need quite that much money. We're just going to pass a law that says they can figure out later where to make do, right? Well, why are school board stepchildren in this process? Why is there a double standard saying the school boards losing the most have the least say and no say effectively in these deals? That's crazy. That's why we're saying school boards have to get control of their money back, all right? I want to say two other things about this. You need great schools for economic development purposes, right? Think about the economy today. It's not just that tech is more important and STEM is more important, and we know those things. We have a labor shortage in this country, right? Baby boomers are clocking out at a record rate. We have the lowest unemployment in historically post-war America history, and that's not going to change much, right? Because we have so many people retiring and they have to get replaced, right? The number one site location advantage for a region attracting companies to either relocate or expand in their metropolitan area is the availability of skilled labor. It's like number one, number two, and number three. There's no contest. That's what matters the most, right? And think about it. When a company says, well, we'd like to think about, going to the St. Louis area or wherever, and they start talking to their managers and they're looking at the prospects of that place, right? The first thing people are going to ask is, how are the schools, right? Quality of life. Read, first buzzword under the quality of life issue is, how good are the schools? Not just because people might transfer there and they want good schools for their kids, but also pragmatically, can we hire people that are qualified to work for us in that labor market, right? Do they have the skills base? So by doing what you're doing tonight, by protecting the tax base for the future public education and brain cells and skill levels of your labor market here, you are the business climate warriors. You're doing the best thing you could possibly do to defend the future economic prospects of your city and your region. And I'm not lying to you. That's the real truth. Thank you.
While you anticipated the first question I got from earlier, why should we believe Good Jobs First, their methodology and how you collect things? Aren't you just working for the union?
Yes, so we're unabashedly pro-labor and pro-equity and progressive taxation and Good Jobs First, and wear it on our sleeves. No shame there at all. But the numbers are official numbers. The numbers in our study come from the official audited financial reports of your 24 school districts here. We didn't make those up, right? They have to report them. They're required by Missouri law to do that now. So don't take our word for it. Go look up the documents yourselves if you want to see the numbers. But that's
we have school board
Yep.
members here. When you hear about people protesting at school boards, demanding transparency, there's hardly anything that's more transparent than school board data. It's more responsible and transparent. The clear lines of governance are right there, as opposed to the privateers that it's hard to find anything other than their 990s. Here's one I'm going to have to take. I'm sorry. What about giving seniors tax breaks? And I have to say, we were asked about tax breaks in the city of St. Louis for seniors. We said as long as they're means tested, that would be okay. And so they did that. The bill that went through the Board of Aldermen was means tested. That means that Rex Singfeld doesn't get the tax break that I might be available. I didn't think you had that.
actually I do. It's okay.
Let's see. Oh, can we ID each developer and how much corporate welfare they get? We might want to. No, I can't say that. Thank you, Jay. We might want to identify the people who are getting those tax breaks.
Yeah. So Missouri has a centralized state disclosure system for TIF districts, which is better than average. It's true in a handful of states, especially here in the Midwest, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, that because TIF has been so excessive, so out of control, and so controversial for a long time, one response is that the state governments have stepped up and set up pretty good disclosure systems at the state level. So each local government has to report every year on your TIFs. So there's actually been a modest number of academics who've been writing about TIF because you've had better than average data here in Missouri for years.
That's good to know.
Uh-huh.
A comment about the special school district. Most people don't know this. They constantly beat on the St. Louis public schools because we have about $18,000 per pupil expenditure. The special school district of St. Louis County, which includes 3 trade schools, which we're trying to open one in St. Louis public schools. You can applaud. It's $129,000 per pupil expenditure for the special school district. Wow. Could you comment on the argument that the school district is actually better off because without the incentives, most of the developments would never happen and revenue would be lost?
So this is a classic question we get. First of all, don't forget the diversion happens for 23 years, right? So that, like, everybody who's in school today won't even still be in school by the time any of the projects time out and the increment is no longer diverted and goes back into the regular pot, and back into the school fund or the general fund of the city. That's one problem. The second problem is the logical problem here, and that is, how do you know that a development would not have occurred otherwise, right? The way it's structured is this sort of but-for pledge, right, where the developer says, but for the deal, but for the subsidy, we wouldn't do the deal. And very few places are rigorously, and so governments can't look inside the black box, right? They can't see the minutes of the board meetings of the corporations. They can't read the site location spreadsheets. there may be some disclosure, and I know your city is now under much more pressure to be more rigorous about analyzing proposed deals, and we've certainly talked to Mr. Richardson about that for another project we're doing, and we understand that's all very much because of all the heat and pressure that's been raised around this issue for the last several years, and that's good. It means that some companies that might try to get money that really don't need it might not even knock on the door anymore. You want to discourage the bottom feeders. But at the end of the day, the real problem is that there's no way to know for sure, right? And you also don't know, like, what else could the city have done with other toolkits that it has, right? The city has infrastructure spending. It has money. It has training money. It has it has land use authority. It has zoning powers, right? There's lots of other things that cities use to encourage reinvestment. TIF is just one, but it's a very expensive one. That's the problem.
This is an interesting one. We have some strange bedfellows on incentive reform, e.g. the Libertarian Show Me Institute, that's Rex Singfeld's group. Should we partner with them, or would that possibly lead us astray?
So it's not just unique to Missouri. We actually work with a few other libertarian think tanks in a few other states who have, we could almost write each other's talking points about our criticisms of the structural flaws of these programs. Because if you're being intellectually honest, and I think we are, you know, everything I just said about the history of the perversion of TIF in Missouri is objectively true. And it's not unusual in other states that it's played out that way. It's the deregulation, if you want to be use a polite term, right? So, you know, obviously we may part ways on some of the remedies. So, for example, the libertarians may say we would take the resulting savings and use it in tax breaks. And we would probably disagree with that sharply and say, no, it really needs to go back to those schools that have been getting screwed all those years. But we can agree on the structural problems and the fixes necessary to quit the stupid wastes of money and giveaways that are disinvesting public services. And I'll say this too, another libertarian, prominent libertarian in your state whose name I won't mention, who used to lead a public body in the other end of the state, was also very supportive of this new accounting reform and brilliantly used the data in a different public body in Kansas City to push reinvestment as well. So you have conservative allies in this state.
Can we sue for the $167 million lost?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I doubt it. Be honest with you. That would be novel. You know, there are some creative lawyers out there. Right?
Where did the money go that we lost for the closing of schools? I don't think any of us can answer that question. I will say that we all have to recognize there's a declining population in the city of St. Louis, and one of the recommendations on page 12 of this is how do we address affordable housing and homelessness. On any given night, 4,000 of our kids don't know where they're going to sleep. Some of them are couch surfers, some of them are actually homeless, but about 4,000 on any given night. Until we really, in fact, that's one of the things about TIFs and tax abatements. There's plenty of old white men in St. Louis. We need young families to move in. Sorry.
No. So one of our remedies, based on a thing we saw in Michigan, in Flint, right? Flint is a severely impacted city, famous for all the plant closings there, Roger and Me, the famous Michael Moore movie and stuff, right? So the county treasurer there, who takes title to tax delinquent homes, because people were just leaving town and just, you know, throwing away the keys and abandoning their homes, he said, you know, some of these homes we can't save, but I want to save more than we can. And I'm going to create a TIF district composed of the 5,000 properties I have title to, and I'm going to borrow money and use the money to save as many of the homes as I can, and put them and sell them for cheap back to homeowners, and get the homes back on the tax rolls. And it's worked. It's a famous program.
We've got another legal question. I'm not sure we're going to be able to handle this one, but explain what the legal basis is that allows a political entity, a city, to seize the tax revenue from another political entity, a school district. One city can't seize the tax revenue from another city. Why can they do that from a school district?
Boy, that's a great question. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but if somebody figures out a way to challenge that reality in the state enabling legislation, that would be revolutionary.
There's at least 4 attorneys I know in the room.
Shazam.
I'm going to get them together after this, and we'll discuss some. Are there any such studies for the entire state of Missouri? What other incentives for developers have been attractive?
We have not done any studies on Missouri. We do have a page dedicated to Missouri on our website, which you can find easily, which tells you the big dogs, the big programs, the big corporate welfare recipients. Obviously, you've got the new Boeing deal happening here. You've had other controversial deals, Express Scripts, other deals. You should know, for example, too, on the other side of the state, Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, and the 2 states did something very radical 5 years ago. They signed a legally binding deal between the 2 states saying Missouri and Kansas can no longer use state money to pirate jobs back and forth across the state line. Because dozens of companies had done that, for $1/3 billion, $330 million had been wasted paying Applebee's and AMC and a bunch of other companies to just jump the state line and create new jobs, which were just like new commuting routes, right, in their patterns. So there's a history of reform in your state here.
Another question about lawsuits. They were saying, have lawsuits been brought already after Anya's revelations? I don't think quite yet.
No, but in Pennsylvania, for Philadelphia, for example, an education champion there, a woman named Helen Gim, who was then on the city council but had originally come up as an activist parent within the public school system there, and very close relationship to the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, your sister union there. She championed this reform bill that's phasing out this stupid abatement program for high-end housing.
This is for the school board. We'll take this up later, but how can we support the school board in fighting TIFs and tax abatements? We'll come up with that with the school board.
And I'll just say to the school board members, thank you so much for coming. We want to make sure you can talk to your peers in Kansas City because they have been outspoken on this issue for 4 years. They have an entire page dedicated on their website. If you go to kcpublicschools.org and then about, it's all about their war with the city council over abatements. And the former superintendent, Dr. Bedell, we worked closely with his staff and with his successor staff. We may do a study over on that end, but they immediately jumped on the data and did their own back of the envelope study and came up with exactly the same kind of racial disparities we're talking about. Their losses are over $1,900 per student per year. Again, majority black and brown student body.
This is going to work out. We're running out of time. I only got 2 questions left, and we'll have a little summary. The good jobs first recommendations on page 12. The question is, could these be addressed by city or state government? And the answer is yes. That would take both. The tax commission, I believe, is a state legislative governed entity, so those changes would have to be done by the state.
I think that's right. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's correct.
And I would also add, these aren't just recommendations we pulled out of thin air. There are states where school districts' funds aren't touched, and I think that's Alabama, Florida, and Maryland. So this is possible. It is possible to get these reforms through, and it is possible to shield the school the school funding.
One more bright spot, New York State. So we did a big study proving that schools in that state lose $1.8 billion per year to corporate tax abatements. And the 2 chairs of the 2 economic development committees in the Senate and Assembly responded by introducing a bill, which is about to get heard again, saying in the future, they're called IDAs, the economic development agencies there, can no longer abate any school taxes. The school share of the property tax would just be off the table and save the schools $1.8 billion. There are some hot fights going on right now in Long Island. One school board in Long Island, New York, has basically said, we don't care what happens to that bill. The IDA is going to behave as if the law is already on the books. You don't get our money anymore because you're sitting here telling you're going to abate more apartment buildings and we're going to have more kids in school and nobody's paying any taxes for it. What do you think that's about? And they're exactly right.
So you anticipated the last question, but are there black and brown impoverished cities that have remedied this situation and made any moves forward?
Well, we certainly like what's going on in Cincinnati with the teachers union there. They're fighting back. They're winning on pushing back on so-called pilots or offsetting payments to get more payments to cushion the blow, so to speak, on abatements. In Chicago, tax increment financing has actually been a huge political issue in the last 3 or 4 contract settlements with the Chicago Teachers Union. They're actually revitalizing schools with TIF money in Chicago now, thanks to the Chicago Teachers Union. Yeah.
Anya, 1 minute, please. Bring us home.
Yeah, and then like I was saying, Philadelphia is a majority black city, and they were able to push through some reforms. And it wasn't exactly what we were saying, but they were able to push through reforms on some of the most costly abatement programs. And it's also an abatement program that, like Greg said, only was really applicable to high-income residents. So that was richer people in the city already saving money, and the city council was able to push back and say, wait, it doesn't make sense for you to abate 100% of your property taxes for 10 years straight. And they were able to reform that. And now it was a few years delayed because of COVID, but now that money is going to go back to the schools and back to the students that actually need it.
So to be clear, as a union, AFT St. Louis is not opposed to TIFs and tax abatements for development, but it should be targeted, and it should not hurt the St. Louis public schools. It should not hurt first responders. We should have the potholes filled, and our taxes shouldn't go up to help fund people who already have plenty of money. Right. Thank you. And let's hear it for Good Jobs First, particularly Anya, who was the lead on this.
We definitely want to thank Anya, our research analyst, and definitely Greg, the executive director of Good Jobs First. We want to, as we transition, we're going to ask my next panel to start heading this way and come to the back. As they transition, we're going to have Dr. Patrick Charles come and speak to you all. He is also our elected Vice President of Political Education, and he's going to facilitate our Charter Cartel panel. Sure. President Ozier would like the lights cut when we get ready to go through it. Back there, thanks guys. We appreciate you. Got you, President. So once again with the questions. So now you have an index card in your folder that's color. So as they discuss, as you have questions, just hold up your card. Ben is not. Seth and Lavette, wave your hand. They'll come and get your cards, and then we'll have the same type of questions at the end. Is that okay? Okay, great. I'm glad it's okay. But before I turn it over to Dr. Patrick Charles, I did give a shout out earlier to our elected officials. We want to be clear. We are elected officials. We are not appointed. Let's be clear for democracy. So just going back to say that, I saw a couple of other presidents of our unions, and I saw Mr. Wesley Bell come in. Thank you for who you are, Mr. Bell. Thank you all for our presidents, Mr. Communications, I see you back there. But I just wanted to make sure that you all know that we appreciate you, and we are the people that are electing these people, you all. So we have to make sure that we're supporting our democracy. Dr. Patrick Charles.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Let's give a hand again to Good Jobs First. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. So I want to talk about 3 points that are affecting the public school system in St. Louis. The first one is a kind of a combination. Is the declining population, which results in the declining population of school-aged children, and this results in school closures. Of course, for the past 20 some odd years, those school closures have mostly affected, as you can see on the right, can you all dim the lights, please? Is that better, Jay? Apparently there's a copy of this in the packet, I was told. I believe. On the right, you'll see that most of the school closures have affected the north side of our city. And this is compounded by the fact that a group of privatizers, CJ, privatizers, can you dim the house lights at all? That a group of privatizers is seeking to dismantle our public school system.
First, privateers came for the city water department. Then a billionaire came for the airport. Now, billionaires from out of town are spending millions trying to privatize our public schools in St. Louis. Billionaire CEOs and Wall Street bankers have gathered more than $39 million with the purpose of undermining a democratic public school system with an elected school board. They are hijacking public conversation on the future of public education in our city. Their right-wing ideology favors closing St. Louis public schools and displacing thousands of children in favor of privately managed and privately governed charter schools and tax credit scholarship vouchers. They say they are for school choice, while they are working to make sure St. Louis public schools are not a viable choice. Why would they gather $39 million for Opportunity Trust to promote their dark agenda? Time to shine a light on City Fund and Opportunity Trust. Time to shine a light on Eric Scroggins, Reed Hastings, and John Arnold. Stand with St. Louis Public Schools. Stand up for democracy and elected school boards. When we know the truth, supporters of public education will just say no to the billionaires and yes to St. Louis Public Schools.
So this group of vulture capitalists have formed themselves into what we like to call as the charter school cartel. And for our definition here, CJ, we're going to define cartel as a coalition of special interests having a common goal, such as dismantling public education, which is the cornerstone of democracy, and to replace it with approved boards that are not elected and organizations controlled by millionaires. This is all exacerbated by the fact that our schools in St. Louis are not opened all by our elected school board. The Missouri Charter School Commission, as you will see here, none of them look like the students we serve. None of them understand the kids that we're working with, and they're all from outstate Missouri. Only one lives in actual Kansas City, which is a charter district. This group of vulture capitalists think that this is a game to them. It's like a game of chutes and ladders. And all of this is to dismantle the elected system that we have for public education and take the money away from the children that we serve. So, CJ. Thank you. First, I would like to introduce our panel to have a discussion. I'm sorry, no. Back up. Sorry about that. Carol Burris is a retired public school teacher and a high school principal, is the executive director of Network for Public Education. This is a national organization dedicated to supporting and improving public education. Dr. Burris, who has authored 3 books on educational equity, has received numerous awards for her leadership, including being named 2013 New York State High School Principal of the Year. Carol has not able to be with us, but she sent a video.
Hi, St. Louis. Carol Burris here from the Network for Public Education. I wish I could be with you today, but it's my grandson's 7th birthday, and I've been invited to Disney World, and who can pass up a chance like that? Anyway, I'm here to talk to you about privatization and the movement to destroy the public governance of your schools in St. Louis, Missouri. It's part of a trend that's happening everywhere, all over the country. And so what I thought I would do is give you some perspective on that national trend, talk about what's actually happening in your city, and then in the end, give you some strategies that we think can be helpful in fighting the good fight to keep the public schools for your kids. So let's get started. The first thing to know about what's happening in St. Louis is that it's part of a national strategy. There's not too much that's unique in your city. And that strategy is to throw all kinds of privatization schemes against the wall and see what sticks. Let's talk about charter schools for just a second. Nina Reese said recently that the goal, her personal goal, and the goal of her organization is to turn all public schools into charter-like schools. Now, sounds a lot like the Opportunity Trust, doesn't it? And then we have all kinds of voucher schemes all over the nation as well. So if we look right now at the landscape in Missouri, it's not very good. We have a report card coming out soon, and Missouri earns, sadly, a grade of F across a variety of measures. In terms of privatization, you have an ESA voucher program that your legislature is going to try to expand this year. And then, of course, you have your charter schools in St. Louis and Kansas City, and I would think in one other place. And according to the latest NCES data, there are 82 open charter schools now in the state, which is some pretty big growth since the program began. Now, if you kind of look back, you'll see that in 2014 in the city of St. Louis, there were 31 charter schools. And in 2021, there were 32 charter schools. So you might look at that and say, well, you know, that's not so bad. There's not a lot of growth there, but you have to take into account this. More than 32% of the charter schools that were open in 2014 were closed by 2021. So what you have in St. Louis and in a lot of cities is constant charter churn. So the mom and pop charter schools that you had back in 2014 are now largely being replaced by big chain charter schools. And this impacts kids, right? And families. I mean, you have situations, if you think about that small period of time where you have kids who started kindergarten, their school was closed by the time they got to 4th or 5th grade. And St. Louis is not unique again in this regard. We did a study a couple of years ago, and what we saw was that by year 10, 40% of all charter schools are gone. And a lot of it has to do with scandals, right? So you have charter schools that people are scamming and taking the money, charter schools with low enrollment, charter schools that fake their enrollment in order to get more money. We have a lot of them listed on our website under Another Day, Another Charter School Scandal. And I did a quick check on St. Louis. And in just the last couple of years since we've been following this, we have 18 stories. Now, a lot of the problems that you have in St. Louis has to do with laws that are Missouri laws that really promote this kind of stuff. I mean, you allow for-profit management. You don't have any for-profit run schools that I know of today, but that doesn't mean they're not going to come in when someone decides it's profitable. You have charters in the workplace, in your laws, which, you know, is kind of like the company store. We see it in Florida or in North Carolina. Company comes in, they build the charter school, they can get rent for that charter school, and then in exchange, their employees are the only ones who are allowed to send their children to the charter schools. You have enrollment privileges where it's not just a lottery. You have groups that get a leg up, whether it be siblings, the children of kids, of grandkids, of charter founders. There are all kinds of schemes to make sure that the enrollment is shaped the way the operator wants it to be shaped. You have multiple authorizers, so people can shop among authorizers to see who will give them the best chance of opening the school. Your law encourages the growth of charter chains. And finally, you have loose teacher certification requirements in charter schools. So while teachers are supposed to be certified, there are so many exceptions. The law becomes meaningless. And you have to be really careful right now because these bad practices are going to expand, and you're going to see a push to expand charter schools in other places in the state. Now that the Opportunity Trust got a $36 million charter school program grant, they're going to want to spend all of that money because they get a cut of that money at about 10%. That's $3.6 million. So what do you do? Well, there are some strategies that we recommend. One is follow the money. Who's lobbying for charter schools? And for vouchers, because if you follow the money, you usually find out who is going to come into your state and profit, especially with charter schools. Be on the lookout for changes in the charter law. Be on the lookout for expansion of your voucher laws. Develop grassroots organizations and leaders. People tend to listen to grassroots organizations more than they do, for example, to unions. It's not fair, but that's just the way it is. And you have some great leaders like Gloria Evans-Nolan in your city. Amplify any scandals that happen. Hold proactive meetings with legislators, both at the state and federal level. Talk with them about the problems that you see. Don't just wait for bad laws to happen. And you're protesting them at the time. Try to be a little bit proactive. I highly recommend scheduling a meeting with U.S. Department of Education over that federal charter school grant. It is not hard to do. Get in touch with me. I can tell you who to contact in the department and make sure that you have a lot of different stakeholders in the room. Review all of your charter applications, especially the ones that are looking for CSP grants. They have to be made public. Call out the lies, especially to the department and even to the Opportunity Trust. And then also, if you're not already a member, subscribe to the Network for Public Education. It's free, but it will get you on our mailing list for when we have new studies and other important information. Thanks for listening, St. Louis. And remember, you can always call on the Network for Public Education. We'll do what we can to help. We're small, but we're mighty. And don't give up the fight. Your kids are way too important. And the time to save your public schools is now.
So I would like to introduce our panelists. The first is Ms. Gloria Nolan. Gloria is both a parent and a graduate of St. Louis Public Schools, and she now works for the St. Louis Public Schools as the parent liaison. She has 17 plus years in nonprofit organizations and supports mentoring teams, manages school partnerships, and develops volunteers. Gloria holds a master's degree from the University of Central Missouri and advocates for public education, equity, and policy change. Gloria opposes inequity and school privatization and recently spoke out about both. Gloria trains parents to engage with officials. We're going to Jeff City next month, and and takes trips to the state capitol and builds communities in local schools. She is inspired by her family, and she enjoys themed events and outdoor adventures with her husband and 2 children, both of who go to St. Louis Public School. Gloria, thank you for coming. Our next panelist is the Reverend Dr. Danley. She is a leader with Missouri Jobs for Justice and a member of the United States Media Guild. With over 20 years of ordination, she serves various roles, including Secretary of the International Episcopal Church Task Force on Social Justice, and she's a missioner for public advocacy in the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri, as well as being the president of Mann Elementary's PTO. Dr. Danley holds degrees from Yale, the University of Chicago, and theological seminaries. She lives in St. Louis with her husband and 3 children attending public schools. Thank you, ladies. Would you like to say anything?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, the first thing I want to say is I really wandered into all of this. I literally wandered in. Being a student in St. Louis Public Schools and just someone that really benefited from having really great professional and loving educators who literally changed my life. I have always just been a person who is an advocate. And so I grew up here in St. Louis in North City, and you know what North City is code for, all of the things, neglect and blight and all of those things. But with meager beginnings, I had a mother that was incarcerated, a father that I never knew, and I lived in a foster home. And so I had all of these things stacked against me, and I still had to get up and show up and go to school every day and do my best. And I just, because of my life situation, there was a lot of anger in me, and it began to really spill over at school, where I started to fight over things and just, you know, showing out, like having bad behavior but still decent grades. It wasn't until I got into 7th grade, and that is where, I mean, that's why I have such a love for middle schoolers, because I remember my former self. But that is where I was really found and where I was really loved and pulled aside by my educators. My 7th grade math and science teachers really loved on me, and like I said, they changed my life. They pointed me in the direction of, hey, you can go somewhere, you can be anything. And so I love to share that backstory because it is important and it is who I am in the core. So I really do have love for public schools, St. Louis public schools in particular. Back to how I wandered in, though. I moved away. I went to college. I did some of the things that my teacher said that I would do, all of those things. And my husband and I, we transitioned, moved back to St. Louis, and we have these 2 little children. I wanted our children to go to St. Louis Public Schools. At the time, I was working at a local nonprofit, and I was talking about it, and folks said, girl, if you want to put your kids in St. Louis Public Schools, you better get them on the gifted track. So I'm experiencing St. Louis Public Schools as an adult now, and I don't know all of the different processes, so I'm listening to the moms that I work with. So I took my daughter down. We did the gifted testing. She aced it. It was great. She was in. There were no seats at Betty Wheeler or Mallinckrodt. But there was a new school it wasn't a new school, but they were changing the school into a gifted magnet school, Columbia Elementary. So we toured all three just to make, see what was going on. And we saw inequity at Columbia. And in my mind, I was just like, where's the stuff? Where's all, like, night and day difference? And so I was highly concerned about it. My husband was concerned about it. And I actually started to question and had a meeting with the superintendent at the time, Dr. Adams, of what's going on. He said, well, the school needs parent engagement. And so we decided to get involved. We started a PTO, started raising funds, really tried to support the school, but things weren't changing, and frustration set in. So I began talking to my neighbor. I was talking to my neighbor about these things, and it turned out that according to my neighbor's, her mother told me, hey, my daughter's starting a program, and it's all about educational equity. You should get involved. And I said, oh, okay, maybe, and just let it go to the back burner. Well, they were getting ready to start, so the young lady came, sat on my porch, and said, hey, the program starts next week. We need you to be a part of this. We think you would be great. And the rest is history. I joined the program. We got involved, and we were a group of parents and community members fighting for educational equity. So we thought. Some of the tactics that we used would be things like showing up at school board meetings and calling out the board. At that time, the board was not officially in power, but we still showed up. Lots of things were happening in the background that I had no idea about. One was the young lady, and her name is Charlie Cooksey. She had served, she was a TFA member who was working with some of these groups, and we'll get into that. She was Teach for America, and she was on the school board. So she knew some of the processes of the school board. I didn't really realize that, or I didn't know. And so she basically trained us on how to disrupt the school board, how to call for change and call out injustice and all of those things. We didn't realize, as that group of parents and community members, that we were actually undermining St. Louis Public Schools. We were showing up and we were calling out St. Louis Public Schools on everything. We want to talk about lead, we want to talk about school closures, we want to talk about budget transparency, all of the things. And we never said anything about the local charter schools who were having the same issues. So then I began asking my questions of, well, why are we doing this? Or why are we doing that? And when I would ask those questions, I was met with just this pushback. And I found myself in strange, uncomfortable situations. One day I noticed that the majority of our team was a very small team, was that everybody on our team was TFA. Nobody was from St. Louis. Everybody, they were flown in to live here to do a thing. And I was just like, I said, why is everybody on TFA? Innocent question. I got pulled aside, and she legit asked me, what do you think, we're evil? Whoa. I later found out. And just kind of to fast forward and get to this piece that was really pivotal for me was that we were getting money from an organization called the Opportunity Trust. They paid for everything that we did. Our stipends, our trips. We went on trips and all types of things, learning opportunities, meals, childcare, everything that went along with being a part of their parent cohorts and whatnot. Opportunity Trust was footing the bill for this. And so they were working on bringing school leaders in to open up new schools. And they called them entrepreneurs. And I thought, that's odd. But that's what they did. And one day I went out to lunch with the founder. And I said, we know what we need to do. We need smaller class sizes. We need to pay our teachers, and we need wraparound services. So I was saying all of this stuff that I knew, like, in my heart, like, this is what we need. And he told me to my face, we don't need to do any of that. We just need to burn it down.
What was his name, Gloria?
Eric Scroggins. And I know he hates that he said that to me. Because, I sipped the Kool-Aid. I didn't like it. I started asking questions about it. And I decided to leave the organization. And when I did, I could not rest. Because there was this story, there was this, all of this information coming at me. And I needed to write it down. And so I would try to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I would wake up. I had a notepad by the bed. I was writing things down. And it was a bunch of information. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. And I shared it. Didn't I share it with you? Yeah. I shared it. I said, does this make any sense to you? Because I felt crazy. And then I thought about it, like, I can't say this. I've built relationships with these people. I was on this team for a while. I can't do it. But I couldn't rest. And so I knew that I had to do it. And I finally came up with a statement that I wanted to share that I thought wouldn't be too damaging to the org that I worked for, We Power. And I tried to pitch it back to a newspaper that wrote an article on me before. And they wouldn't take it. So I put it on Medium, and it felt like everybody in the city read it or something. And my phone was ringing off the hook, and I said, here we are. So I'm a part of this now, and I understand what is going on, and I understand that this is real, and it does sound crazy. So when I'm talking about it, when I'm saying, we can't partner with this person, we can't, this person means us no good. I remember I was at a meeting, I saw him, I saw her, this is what they did, this is what they said. I know, I was behind the curtain. I saw what was going on, and I speak out about it, and they would like to label me as a disgruntled employee, but no, that's not it. I'm a disgruntled citizen who believes in democracy. So I am going to tell it, and I can rest now, right? I can rest. And so I have to tell it. I have to share and help people connect the dots, because this is real. There is money flowing in, and the goal is to undermine public education, put us in a situation where we have a system of charter schools, and ultimately move into vouchers and take public education off the table. Once it's gone, we will not get it back.
Should I stop there? No, you're good. Thank you, Gloria. Reverend Danley?
So I'm an expert in many things, and public education is actually not one of them. I have a master's in public policy. I'm a priest, but public education I just came into, again, sort of a sideways. I grew up in Normandy. I saw in my growing up in the 80s in Normandy the decline of our tax base, the decline of our programs. All our music teachers left. When I got to 5th grade, I asked my parents if I could leave because we had never been formally segregated, even though I was one of the few white kids in my class. I wasn't eligible to go to magnet schools in the city. So I ended up going to Crossroads, which is a private school in the Central West End, which is now way more expensive, I think. And then I left St. Louis for 10 years. And I never thought I'd come back. When I came back to be a priest, and I didn't think I was going to have kids or get married, and then I did. And when I was the priest at St. John's in Tower Grove, Karen Hilton asked me if we would partner with the school next door, MAN. And I thought, well, that's a little service oriented. I mean, I'm more into advocacy, but okay, you know, we'll see what we can do. And then, and this was a time during the special administrative board when MAN was fully accredited, but the district wasn't. And Shenandoah was fully accredited, but the district wasn't. And some consultant for the special administrative board came up with this idea that we should tear down or close MAN in Shenandoah and make a mega school, and everything would work out just fine. So again, my kids are now 2 and 1. And I thought, I'm going to go to this meeting. And by this point, I was a volunteer leader in Missouri Jobs with Justice, thank God, so I'd had quite a bit of organizing training. And another volunteer leader, who also is on staff with me now, also a parent of young children at the time, was at the meeting. And we went to the meeting, the consultants didn't offer the option of keeping MAN and Shenandoah open as neighborhood schools. And so we just went around to all the tables and said, write in this option, because that doesn't make any sense. And then that week I thought, what can I do to spread this message? I'm just the priest down the street. My kids are 2 and 1. I don't have kids at MAN. What can I do? And I ran off 150 photocopies at the little church office, and I cut them in half, and I went to dismissal at MAN, and I got on the school buses, and I went in the aftercare program, and I broke all kinds of rules probably. And I just gave every single kid a sheet of paper, and I said, give this to your parents. And it said, show up at the next community meeting that was at CVPA. And so the parents at MAN and the staff at MAN showed up, packed that meeting, and that was the start of saving MAN so that my 3 children could go there. And now I'm the president of the PTO for my sins. And there is no place I would pay to send my kids to MAN. And it is mind-boggling to me that people of my demographic, white, with multiple degrees, married, double income, twist themselves in knots because of the Opportunity Trust, because of Navigate STL. They twist themselves in knots trying to figure out where they should send their kids to school. When the truth is, their kids can go to school anywhere and be fine. I went to Yale. I went to school with the people that are on the board of the Show Me Institute. Okay? I went to school at the University of Chicago and studied economics. I know what these people are up to. They do not care about black kids in the city of St. Louis. They do not care about white kids in the city of Columbia where they are trying to expand charter schools. If they pass vouchers, if they expand vouchers, they're just going to raise the tuition at private schools. Because you see in Iowa and Arkansas, they've already lowered the age for child labor. What's coming is not just about charter schools. It's been since Brown versus Board of Education. The next year, Milton Friedman wrote about this. If you can't afford to send your child to a quality school, they should work. That is the future. That is what they want. So do not believe charter schools are just a step. Vouchers are a step. ESAs are a step. Open enrollment is a step. The 4-day school day is a step. Moms for Liberty is a step. All of it leads to the same thing. If you don't have the money, if you don't have the clout to send your kid to a quality school, they better work. And this has been going on, accelerated, since Brown versus Board of Education on purpose. It is all part of white supremacy. It is all part of patriarchy. And I know these people. I know these people well. And again, there is no place that I would rather send my children, my 3 children, than Mann Elementary School. There are deficits. There are problems. Molly, who is an expert in many things, including TIFs, has been working to make sure that all of our kids and their families, because we have kids from 19 different home languages, can access information, right? Because our PTO is a lot whiter and more English speaking than our school, right? But there is no place that I would rather be. And I am blessed that Karen Hilton asked me to get involved all those years ago.
Thank you both. I have a, being parents that you both are, what worries you about the trust and faith that our city has in public schools?
What worries me?
Yeah.
Oh.
In the institution.
I think it's the point that what's worried me is the idea that they have of our district and how they have put us aside. And there's no, to me, I don't see a path forward from them in engaging in a real way in supporting public education. What worries me are the relationships that I know exist between the people that we're talking about and them.
Well, can we name the names of, like, some of the names that you're talking about?
So are the organizations or our elected officials? Both?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So some of the, I wrote down because there is a playbook that they go by, right? There's a formula. And so as Carol spoke about in the video, it's happening all over the country. So they want to fund charter school expansion and establish bias school navigation tools and start a local, they want to do an educational nonprofit and create organizations for parents to do advocacy and all of these things. So we know Opportunity Trust is doing this work, and they're funding organizations like We Power, Bridge to Hope, Navigate STL, Activate STL, the Education Equity Center. And while I worked for We Power, we were connected with some of our politicians, including our mayor. There are relationships, there are connections, and if you begin to follow the money, it will make sense. During her campaign, there was a donation that came across from, was it Maxine Clark?
Most likely.
Yes, and so someone questioned that, and that was brought up. And, you know, the response was just really weak. The money was not returned, and we're getting what we get.
Reverend?
I'm part of a new group that's part of the Parent Action Council of SLPS that's looking at housing and at TIFs and at tax abatement, and I think it is really important to, we do have a board bill that's supposed to be implemented, that SLPS does have input into the HUDs, into what gets approved at housing, urban development, and zoning, and I think it's really important that we work to make sure that that's enforced. I think it's important that we have more people attending the HUD's hearings and looking at what the proposals that are coming forward, because I mean, it's the HUD's, housing, urban development, and zoning hearings, because it's up to us, right? Like, it's up to us who we elect and who we hold accountable, right?
Absolutely, yes, that's the foundation of democracy.
Yes.
Hold them accountable.
And again, like, I don't fault all the parents that get caught up in the whirlwind of all the advertising and all the mess, right? Because they don't know better. They're told that charter schools are public schools, right? I mean, some of them do, but like most don't, right? It says on the building, public school, right? Atlas is building that new building. It says public school. I mean, it's deceptive, right? So we also have to be gracious, which is hard for me to do about this, gracious in conversations with people to explain that, you know, it is about democracy. It is about having a say in how your schools are run and who runs them. Again, thank you for being here still, you guys. And that charter schools are run by private boards. When they close, you saw all those X's, those millions of dollars in public money just disappear with no transparency, zero, and that public money is gone. So while people are making individual choices that they think are best for their kids, we have to think about the bigger picture. And at this point, we do need to think about the city plan and think about, given where we are now, what are our neighborhood schools? Because again, as a parent, what I see, and again, there is nothing better than being able to walk my kid to school. I don't know why anybody doesn't want to do that. People are like, well, what about man? I'm like, what about man? I walk my kids to school. I have 3 kids. I want to walk them to school. Now 2 of my kids have to take a bus, and half the time the bus doesn't show up. The more that we have neighborhood schools, even if at this point those are charter schools, if we have a city plan, if we don't open new schools, if we deal with what we have now, the stronger our neighborhoods will be, and the stronger our city will be. That was the worst during COVID, that my kids only knew who to play with based on who they went to school with, and there's a whole bunch of kids on their block, and we don't know them because they go all over the place. So let's implement the city plan. Let's deal with what we got. Let's stop busing kids all over creation. Let's build up our neighborhoods, including affordable housing for our families.
For sure. So there's this question, it's in your packet. It's based off what's in your packet. In the playbook for privatization, is TFA, Teach for America, which you mentioned, Ms. Nolan, do you all think that this is a positive or a negative impact on privatization? Then they just need to understand this.
I think it probably started as a good idea, right? But it undermines the professionalism of teaching. As a union member myself, and as someone who supports unions in my work, I see over and over again that majority female and majority black professions are not treated the same as, for example, building trades. And teaching falls into that. And we need to value the skills and the education and the knowledge of teachers and paras and administrators that have gone through years of training and lived experience to get where they are. Because TFA, being a teacher for 2 years, isn't going to cut it.
And often they leave after those 2 years to get their
go to law school.
Get their student
again,
debt
I know
funded.
plenty of people.
This was, to me, so the organizations that I was talking about, so We Power, and I said everybody's on, why is everybody on TFA? What do you think, we're evil?
Just incestuous.
Right. There was that thought of this, of Charlie being a CEO of an organization. It's just like this network that really, so maybe started out to be a good idea, and probably have landed us some really strong and positive and hardworking teachers that have stayed in the field, but by and large, that is not the case.
Right.
Most folks in that that come through that 5 weeks of training to teach our most vulnerable students wind up leaving. And it does create instability. And that 5 weeks is not going to give you the training that you absolutely need to do all of the things in a classroom that a skilled professional has done. They've gone through the educational courses, they've gone through the workshops and all of the things, and then here comes someone who just has an interest in doing good, and then they show up for this limited amount of time, and then they're propelled into, you know, these educational advocacy groups, or our treasurer of the city of St. Louis was a TFA member who worked for 2 years or 3 years, I don't know, left that, worked at a nonprofit, and then became the treasurer. How?
So,
you know, so it winds up doing more harm than good, and especially because those folks are being placed in front of our most vulnerable students. And then those groups, those advocacy groups like Opportunity Trust, We Power, et cetera, will turn around and point fingers at the district and the teachers that are doing their best and hard work and say, hey, you're not preparing the students, you're a failure. But it's just like, but wait a minute, some of what we're seeing is a result of you and what you've done. So you need to take a real hard look at how you've contributed, and then what are you going to do to help? Because when I worked for them, we only showed up at the school board to yell at the board. We didn't volunteer, we didn't tutor, we didn't do anything helpful, we didn't raise any money. We showed up to hold the board accountable. And it just doesn't work out, and that's being, a lot of this movement is being led by that organization, quite frankly.
I'm glad that you said something about boards, because the board of city, it's all interconnected. The Board of City Fund, one of their 3 board seats is the president of TFA.
Mm.
And the privatization playbook that you mentioned, and there's that graphic, is to debase teacher certification and quality. And this absolutely debases it by making it a 5-week program instead of a 4-year degree.
Yeah, and then you can use that for your resume, for, you know, your essay for law school or business school, you know, and just keep on going. And I will say too, one thing I've seen, you know, at MAN, to see all these children who are learning English as a second or third or fourth language, and often coming from so many kids have experienced trauma, whether kids from St. Louis or kids from other countries. And it's like every kid that then has to take standardized tests in English, it's like they deserve medals. And instead we have this, again, racist, these ratings on real estate things, these great schools ratings. They can't even get our schools right on great schools ratings. They still say Fanning is open. I wish my kids could walk to Fanning. You know, it's like, it's absurd. It's amazing how the systems, they just morph. You know, the racist and classist systems, they just keep morphing.
Yeah, so this is another question, and it's going to tie into the racist and classist systems, is who are the entities that sponsor charter schools, and how does that work? Do you all know?
A lot of them are private universities that are also getting incredible tax benefits. St. Louis University, they sponsor Lafayette, Académie Lafayette in Kansas City, where I've never heard a word of French spoken, which is a charter school in Kansas City that supposedly teaches French. It's right next to our office in Kansas City. Wash U sponsors charter schools. KIP, which is currently fighting the unionization of their staff at the high school, and Bugs and Rats. Hawthorne, which just closed. UMSL, again, University of Missouri St. Louis, a public state University. They sponsor some. I mean, it's just, I also think we need to hold these institutions accountable for sponsoring the demise of public education.
Can we also
Could I,
mention the
may
charter
I,
schools?
that's what I was getting ready to,
Commission?
that's what I was getting ready to say. I wanted to chime in with the Charter School Commission, and so I know that there may have been a little gasp when I said our mayor, but before she was our mayor, she was a legislator in the Missouri House. And some of the legislation that she was pushing forth and bills that she was bringing helped to create what is now the Charter School Commission. And those universities that were, sponsoring the charter schools, they've kind of stepped aside now, and everything is coming through the Charter School Commission. Robin Wabi, yes, who used to work for a former mayor, is in charge of this, just blessing charter schools. And so she makes more than the governor. That's what Ray said.
Twice as much as the governor, I do believe.
Twice as much. But so these are facts, and so this is just not pointing the finger. This is actual legislation that happened to say, hey, we need this body in place to push forward the proliferation of charter schools, and it is real, and this is what we have now. And so now those universities have stepped aside. The Charter School Commission is, stamping approval for these schools, and they're working in coordination with the Opportunity Trust, who has entrepreneurs who are opening up these new schools. And so even though it was not a binding agreement, we did have a moratorium for a moment on new charter schools opening in the city. Let's be honest, we have what we have, and even with the ups and downs that we saw, we have the schools that are here, they're here. Some of them may close, they may stay open. For those charter schools, they're in place. They're a part of our educational landscape.
They're parts of our neighborhoods.
They're parts of the neighborhoods, things like that. But continuing to open more schools is just disruptive, and it is not helping. We have issues that we need to address at the core, poverty at the top of the list, and a new school is not going to help that. And so a new high school, Believe Academy and others, a new school sponsored by a church, a friendly temple, unfriendly academy, whatever, that is not going to help us.
Well, the pastor's on the board of Opportunity Trust.
Oh, how convenient. Those types of connections. And so when you start connecting those dots, following the money, then there's a big thing unraveling. But this is what we're talking about, and it's important for people to understand it. And so that's the work we have to do.
You said some really good things in there about following the money and finding out how this works, because often the people that are the admin for these schools are TFA. Mm-hmm. It's a jobs program for people who are in TFA. And this leads into the next question. Superintendent Scarlett, thank you for being here. We appreciate you being here. Someone asked, how much is the SLPS superintendent being paid? And that's to lead into this question. And it says, it is, you go to St. Louis Post-Dispatch, they will tell you how much. I mean, this is not secret. And how many schools is our superintendent over? 62? And that compares with how much are the people at the top of the charter schools being paid in relationship to the number of schools that they are overseeing? Do you all have any information on that?
I don't, but can I, before we, I know we're getting close.
Yeah, we're getting close.
I think it's really important right now, while the Missouri legislature is in session, I want to reiterate what I said earlier. All of these tools of privatization are connected. All of it is meant to eliminate public schools so that rich people do not have to pay taxes, and so that only their children will get an education. So you need to go right now and look at all the bills that are moving forward about expanding charters, about open enrollment, about vouchers. There's, they just had a hearing about how the 4-day school wasn't really impacting kids' performance. Well, I didn't get the memo that now our work week was only 4 days, or that we got childcare subsidies. Our state budget hasn't changed. So there's a lot of work to do, and all of this plays together. Do not let them pit rural against city, against suburban, because all of this, plus all the money going into the school board races in suburban, urban, Springfield Public School District race right now, all of it is connected to destroying public schools. Charter schools are an important issue, but there are other issues too, and we have to attack the octopus.
Thank you. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate that.
One last thing, just please tell them that I said it. Thanks.
We want to once again thank both of our panels. We want to thank Greg, Anya, Teresa, Gloria, Patrick, and Dr. Charles for giving us the information that we probably should have already been given. We thank you all for always supporting public education. We thank our elected officials who are here, who have been elected to their position. We appreciate you. We're glad that you weren't appointed. But remember, at the end, if you can't remember everything, all students cannot learn unless they have support systems in place that remove barriers to their learning. I'm going to call for my presidents who come and close us out. Once again, thank you all. They said it's really foggy outside, so be safe. We only be here another 15 minutes.
Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'm going to be very brief. I want to answer that last question that we had here. We have Dr. Scarlett, who has over 60 schools. We have a couple of these little superintendents over charters, and I don't like to mention names, but Kip and Kelly Garrett over there. You can go on their 990 and look it up. He makes over $300,000 a year, and he is managing 3 schools. We got my good friend, Eric Scroggins, who declines to debate with me in public forum about what's going on over there at the Opportunity Trust. He hasn't talked to a single kid since he came to St. Louis several years ago and became a millionaire. This guy taught for a year and a half, some school in Brooklyn. The rest of the time, he bounced around from Teach for America to Teach for America till he got 30-some, 40-some million dollars from City Fund, and he rode into St. Louis to save us. Nobody asked for him. Nobody voted for him. Who voted for him? Anybody in here vote for Eric Scroggins? Then what gives him the right to come here and say what's best for our kids, and then to pay other drones, a lot of black drones, to go out and sell his wares? He don't show up, does he, Jay? You seen Mr. Scroggins? No, he sends out all these drones. He don't come. Thank you for coming. I'm just amazed that in this country, democracy works everywhere except where you got poor and black kids. Then you need somebody to appoint somebody that's going to take care of you. That sounds like plantation mentality to me. Yeah, I said it. It's plantation mentality. You can't govern yourself. We're going to tell you what's good for you, and we're going to pay people millions of dollars to come and ram that stuff down your throat. We don't have to take it. We're not going to take it. And as long as I got breath in my body, we're going to fight them. And somebody in here is from Opportunity Trust. Tell Eric I'll meet him anywhere, any place, and debate. I want to debate. Meet me, Mr. Scroggins. Those barriers we talked about, that's Maslow. That's why we need full-service community schools, to remove those barriers. We need that to lift our teachers up. instead of talking about they ain't did this and they ain't did that. These teachers work hard, and we need help. You see what I'm saying? They got people thinking that schools are like a dry cleaners. You drop your kids off, and then several years later you pick them up, and they're all educated and ready to go. It's never meant to be that. It's a partnership where we work with parents, the community, and caregivers to work together to get it done. We're buying those false narratives, and it's keeping us from getting to the source of the problem. We need to have our politicians to be called to the carpet, because I'm sick and tired of them using our schools for their little private piggy bank to finance their shining cities on the hill. How many food courts do we need? Then we had enough. You don't grow no city by having food courts. People get on the highway, drive down here, eat, and leave. Lastly, let's support our schools. We have a literacy initiative that is piloted by our new superintendent on the 29th of this month, 27th of this month. It's going to be in the library. We're there with them too. We need to come out. We need to show up. Let me tell you something. Some people don't tell the truth. I'm going to tell the truth. The only thing I fear is God. But I'm going to tell the truth. Kids can't read on grade level just reading to school. Think about yourself. The schools teach you the fundamentals. You take those fundamentals just like playing a music instrument, but you practice at home and other places, riding in the car, reading billboards, and doing other things. This community has got to mobilize behind our school district and our families and our kids to make this happen. Don't buy into that snake oil that these privatizers are selling, because they're going to tell you it will cure all all of your ills. There are no silver bullets. We need to roll up our sleeves and do what we need for the best of this community. Thank you very much.